How did you manage that, and what was the thing that was driving you to do that and make it bigger? Charity that was helping so many people. I think I read it was about 11,000 bikes you provided in 10 years.
Running something in your spare time around the bike project, lots of people with side hustles during your other job. The bit that's more challenging is focus, having to focus around everything else.
Yeah, telltale signs when you speak to a founder where you think, okay, no, they're really committed and they're determined.
Is this person serious? Do they have many years of dedication to trying to solve this problem? What level of resilience have they shown and determination have they shown to try and solve this problem so far and to this business and make it successful? I think the most important thing is, what is this founder like? Because at an early stage in a business, the idea is going to change and develop. Do they have the right skills, the right insight into this problem? And then I think the other thing is what is this problem? Is this a big enough problem? Is this a really painful problem for those people experiencing it?
Hi and welcome back to Seat at My Table. Today I'm really excited to be joined by Jem Stein, the founder of Daring Capital, a syndicate of impact investors who are investing in underrepresented founders trying to make the world a better place, and former founder and CEO of the Bike Project, which was really connecting bikes with refugees to help them survive in England. I always like to start off with the question, Jem, how do you describe yourself in 3 words?
Interested, interesting, and unpredictable.
I like the unpredictable part. And I always think, there's this quote that says the most interesting people are the interested people. And I think that's so commonly mistaken when you get people in conversations and they think that talking about all the things that they love is what's going to make them seem really interesting to people. But really it's being interested in what someone else has to say. And, I think you can tell that you're that type of person, given that throughout your career, you've been interested in helping others, clearly understanding their stories and their missions, and then propelling them. So there's so much I want to talk about today. I cannot wait to go into Daring Capital. But I think to start off with, I would love to go to the Bike Project and think about the moment when you started that. And if you could also explain to people what that really looked like, what your aim was, and where the idea came from.
Sure. So wonderful to be here.
Thank you.
The idea for the Bike Project started at university. I was a student in London at the LSE, and I joined the befriending scheme for unaccompanied asylum seekers. So that meant I met young people under the age of 18 who'd arrived here without their parents, who were claiming asylum in this country. Now, at that point, it's hard to believe now. So this was about 2009, 2010. At that point, the word asylum seeker, people hadn't heard of that. Refugees, when I spoke to people about it, nobody really knew the term. It was very under the radar issue, unlike now, of course.
Yeah.
And I joined a befriending scheme, and I met a boy called Adam. Adam was from Darfur, which is in the west of Sudan, witnessed the biggest genocide of the 21st century. Fled that without his parents and arrived in the UK. One of the big challenges I realised, aside from everything else he faced, was he couldn't get anywhere because as an asylum seeker, you get just £35 a week to live off. It's about more like 40 now. And you're not allowed to work. And so London public transport, or frankly, public transport in any big city, is very expensive. So in London, for example, a bus pass is £21 a week. That doesn't even include the tube. And if you're stuck out near Hounslow, near Heathrow, as Adam was, it's very expensive and difficult to build a life for yourself. So I ended up getting him an old bike, and that was really the first step into normal living for him.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden he could access education, healthcare, psychological support. When I graduated, I worked for a couple of years for a different charity and set up the Bike Project in my spare time. And after about a year or so of running it in my spare time, I realised it had real potential, and I left that charity to set up the Bike Project as an independent social enterprise. We launched in March 2013, so about 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
I think that's amazing. I think even just thinking about Adam, the fact that there's a group of individuals who are under 18 who have fled their country after witnessing such horrendous things, then arrive here and actually aren't allowed to work, don't have much money at all to live on. And then even just something as basic as something that so many people take for granted as actually just getting to different places, whether it's, like you said, education, healthcare, mental support, to then come up against a barrier like that is actually, again, something that probably so many of us don't even take into consideration in our daily lives, even though obviously transport can be very expensive in London. When I think about you and the fact that you were working at another charity and then you decided to set this up in your spare time, what were your days looking like? I'm guessing that was a lot of responsibility at the beginning, as well as very minimal time to achieve what you wanted to achieve alongside another job. How did you manage that? And what was the thing that was driving you to do that and make it bigger? Because, of course, after 10 years, which is, I know that you stopped your job at the charity partway through that, but it grew into a massive charity that was helping so many people. I think I read it was about 11,000 bikes you provided in 10 years. So what did that look like when you first started and you were trying to balance everything, as well as, I guess, witnessing people probably having really challenging situations?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, running something in your spare time in some ways is harder, in some ways is easier. So I ran the bike project, on weekends and in evenings, and, like lots of people with side hustles during your other job, but you just don't tell everyone. And so, so the bit that's more challenging is focus, having to focus around everything else.
Yeah.
The bit that's a little easier is you don't have to earn a living from it, right? Because once you're an independent organization, it's your full-time gig, and suddenly you've got to build this thing and pay the bills.
Yeah.
Life becomes a lot harder, much harder, actually. And so one of the big challenges is actually going back to that first phase even, that was challenging doing it in my spare time, but it also in some ways had less pressure because I had a stable job that paid the bills. I didn't have to worry about my salary and paying my rent every month.
Yeah.
I could just do it, and if it went well, it went well. If it didn't, it didn't. So in some ways I'd say that was more work but less pressure.
And that's so interesting, because I think there's so many people who probably do have a side hustle alongside their day job, and they're waiting for that golden moment where they can quit their full-time job and go into the side hustle, and probably think that's going to be like a sigh of relief. And it's probably really important to hear the fact that actually suddenly probably some of the enjoyment fades from the side hustle, because it then becomes highly pressurized, because it then has to sustain you. And like you said, you're kind of out on your own then, and you don't have an employer to be paying you kind of no matter what happens. So that's super interesting.
Yeah, I always say to people, if you can do this, it is better to have another source of income part-time whilst work, when rather than going from, okay, I've got a full-time job and I do this in evenings and weekends, to leaving that job with a load of unknown. If you can, say get a job, get some paid work somewhere else 2 or 3 days a week, and then top that up with your other work through your, what is no longer a side hustle, through your new business, that is a better transition for a bit, I think, than going all in on your business too soon. I say that as someone that went all in on their business twice.
Yeah.
So, and got away with it. But I do think it's probably a preferable way of doing it. I mean, it does depend on your financial circumstances, of course. If you have enough money to work for 6-12 months without earning a salary, then then it's different. Maybe you could go full time. But if you're like, right, I've got 2 or 3 months of personal runway, and then frankly, I need to be bringing in the cash, that's quite a short period of time to be generating a meaningful income from zero, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I think there are a few factors that go into that, but it's something there's something that's not talked about enough, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially at the moment, having your own business is almost idolized and made to look really exciting and fun.
Yeah.
The more you talk to founders, the more you realize that they have to be so passionate about what they do to get through the infinite challenges that they face.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I guess actually this experience goes really well with what you're doing now, obviously working with so many different founders. Obviously we'll come to that, but I do have to ask, from a personal point of view, after doing the bike project and obviously witnessing asylum seekers coming over and those who, for example, were under 18 having these challenges, I can imagine throughout the 10 years that you were working on the bike project, you did get to talk to many people in very challenging situations. Is it frustrating when you hear a lot of the rhetoric in the news and media at the moment around asylum seekers, refugees? Do you feel like there's a misconception there? Because even when I read, I think it was in an interview that you did during the bike project, and you were saying about the amount of money they get, the cost of transport, and the situation that leaves them in. I think I was completely ignorant to that. Yeah, how do you feel about that when you hear people, like some of the negative dialogue around asylum seekers and refugees?
Yeah, so I guess I went full-time on the bike project in 2013. Within a few months, we got a donation of old bikes from the Metropolitan Police. And the Metropolitan Police, maybe slightly naively, decided to do a little bit of PR about it, thinking it would have generated positive PR. It didn't. They got a whole load of stick, why are the bikes not for British people? And actually at that point, there was an organisation around called Britain First, which was a far-right group, kind of a bit like the BNP, I guess, that launched a petition against us.
Wow.
It wasn't on an independent site. I don't imagine too many people signed it. It's something I've dealt with from the very start. Speaking to my successor at the bike project, it is much worse now because the rhetoric then was bad, but that has gone from rhetoric to real, actual physical danger for both the asylum seekers and those working with asylum seekers. So, we see, 18 months ago, hotels being burned down. Feels like we were only ever, one social media storm away from that happening again. One bad story triggers it all. So I really think that we are in it's a lot worse now in terms of those threats, and people, it's also expensive because they have to spend money on security.
Yeah.
But my point really is, I guess I have dealt with it for so long, you kind of end up just brushing it off a little bit. It's just kind of noise in the background that I don't really notice that much except in the abstract. It is disappointing that there is not much of a counter voice. There has never been much of a counter narrative amongst our politicians anyway. That's always been, I think, a source of disappointment, and that remains today. But yeah, in terms of how do you manage it, I don't know, it's just become a thing that is in the background and I don't really notice it.
Yeah.
To be honest, it sounds a bit weird to say, but from a selfish perspective, once it became a much bigger issue in the press, which is about around the time of the Syrian refugee crisis, that was much better for the bike project in terms of our media profile. Even though there was a lot of anger about asylum seekers, there was also a kind of push to support them as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of people angry about the anger against them. So that really did help us too in terms of putting us on the map.
Yeah.
But in terms of how you deal with it, it's sort of, it's just become noise.
I can imagine as well, you can't focus too much on it because then that's when you almost start to expend energy on that rather than what you're the positive impact that you're trying to have. You can't spend your life just arguing with people who are trying to bring you down or say the opposite, because then you won't actually get around to sourcing bikes for people needing it and supporting them. I can imagine though that even if it's in the background, it can take its toll over time, or I think I'd become a bit more pessimistic hearing all these people, I guess, have those opinions.
you do notice it, but I don't know. You also meet people that do incredible, in your day-to-day, you meet a lot more people that are supportive than you do who are against it.
Yeah.
But it's changed. I'd say the rhetoric was always bad, but it definitely has gone up a level over the last year or so.
Yeah. I imagine that's really challenging for so many people.
Yeah.
And I guess that also brings me to maybe the transition away from the bike project. I saw that you spoke a bit about feeling really burnt out towards the end. You'd come through COVID, seen a lot of challenges. How did you come to that decision? How did you feel about the decision to step away? And what was the part that led up to that? Was it just getting to the point where you needed a change?
So I guess in terms of what built up to it, I'd run the bike project for about 10 years. It was like a huge undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
I'd started it when I was 24. And so really it was kind of all I'd ever done properly. And it was just time to have a change. You tell the same stories, you give the same narrative, you face the same challenges, you have the same discussion so many times. I needed a change from that. There's also a lot of pressure running a bigger organization.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was time for me to do something different. And I was also pretty exhausted. And so, yeah, I told the board I was leaving. The board recruited a new CEO. The period whilst, the handover period was tough because, there's that kind of instability around the organization. Everybody knows you're leaving. Everybody knows the new CEO, but will come, but you don't know who that is. So you're kind of a bit of a lame duck CEO in the interim, which wasn't much fun.
Yeah.
And was very challenging for the organization as well as being very challenging for me. But yeah, I left, I handed over, and then there was a tough few months of sort of recovery and kind of figuring out what was next for me. But I thought I would take a much longer break, but I realized quite quickly that I needed to be doing something else.
Yeah.
I needed to be getting involved in something else. And so, yeah, the idea for Daring Capital had kind of come around from a conversation with some of my investors, and I sort of parked it for a bit. And then, ended up cracking on pretty quickly, probably about April 2023, having left in January.
Wow. It's got a quick turnaround. I think the amazing thing there is sometimes it's not that you need, like you mentioned, a break from everything where you just kind of lie on a beach for months. Actually, it's almost just a change of scenery, a change of rhythm, and then you feel energized again.
Yeah.
I always find that sometimes, even in work life, I don't know, you get to the point where I just need to quit and run away. But actually, I have a couple of weeks holiday, and even just the change of scenery, the change of people that you're around, you can almost refuel yourself, and maybe you have a different idea and you look at things in a different way. And it's not always that you actually just need to run away for months on end to gain that energy back.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think to go from running a really intense business to thinking you can kind of, sit on the round for a bit and sit on the beach for a bit, that's just not going to work.
No.
But yeah, I think
you're going to be bored.
You're going to be bored. Your mind's going to be elsewhere. So yeah, I actually felt a lot better when I decided, right, I'm going to crack on with something else.
Yeah. And it's a very good thing that you cracked on with. So Daring Capital, this caught my eye a while ago. And it's funny because I know a few people who connected with you and told me about you before I ever reached out or spoke to you, which shows how much the work that you're doing speaks for itself as well. Can you explain to everyone, I guess, the ethos behind it and what problem you're trying to solve through Daring Capital?
Sure. So at the Bike Project, we were funded through a mixture of grants, but also through traded income. So all the bikes were collected. We sold half to the public and donated the other half. And over time, we grew to about 2.5 million of annual revenue, and working with, we had about 35, 40 staff at various times in the last year or so. And we also raised some social investment at various points, so like repayable finance to help us grow. But what I really found was, so at those points where you need capital to grow, the kind of institutions that offer capital had very slow bureaucratic processes. They wouldn't support you at an early stage. To be a certain size, it'd be a very long process. The terms were not very founder friendly, and it was genuinely a really difficult, onerous process. So and that always got me thinking. And so I ended up raising from my network, people that I knew, supported me, and through those relationships, which ended up being really brilliant for me, both in terms of advice and cash. And I ended up, through having raised finance sitting on the board, on the investment committees for a couple of large foundations. And that really gave me a perspective into how hard it was for early stage founders to raise the right kind of finance, because in social finance, there's kind of two paradigms. There's the sort of debt fund. So there's, fairly high interest loans for established businesses with kind of predictable cash flow. And then there's a sort of venture model where, VCs need venture capital firms need kind of 100x return on their money. And they see impact as just a lens through which they generate those returns. And what I was meeting all the time was brilliant founders starting really impactful businesses that could grow and generate good returns, just maybe not crazy returns. And they just weren't getting a look in with those types of finance. So I really wanted to solve that problem for them. And so I started Daring Capital with a few of my investors in the Bike Project to really fill that gap for overlooked founders building businesses that make the world a better place. We launched in September 23.
It's amazing. And I was having a look at your portfolio, and you are investing in businesses and people who don't always have access to that capital. So I could see loads of female founders, which I love to see. So I think when you look at the stats on the amount of women getting investment, it's minuscule. And again, the problems that Daring Capital's portfolio is solving is so wide-ranging, but again, all with such a positive mission and goal. How has it been trying to raise, I guess another thing to explain to the audience is, rather than it being a fund where you pull capital and then Daring Capital, I guess, and invest in businesses on the behalf of investors, my understanding is that you bring almost like angel investors together who then can decide if they invest or not. And so rather than it being a fund, you're bringing people together and they can say, okay, actually, that's a really good deal that you've brought in. Let's invest in this business. But how has it been finding individuals who want to put their money into these types of businesses where perhaps the return isn't as high compared to other funds that they can invest their money in, but instead the focus is on actually potentially the mission that the business has instead?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the investor side, so I think what's helped is just being really upfront about what we're trying to do. I think a lot of impact investors don't like to, they will either say that they are targeting what we call market returns, which is actually really varied and much more complex than that phrase would suggest. But yeah, a lot of them would claim that there is no discount for impact, or they would just kind of fudge it and say, oh, we don't really talk about that. We'll just go for the best. We don't talk about that. I think one of the things that's helped with what we've done is I've been really clear with people, with our investors. The first thing I say is, look, these are businesses. We want returns. This isn't philanthropy, but the returns that you can get from these businesses probably are not quite the same as you can from normal venture capital. If your number one priority is to maximize your returns, there is probably better places to put your money. Now, that's not to say some of our business can't do very well, and some of them are doing incredibly well financially, I mean, but that's not the only thing we look at. So that when you have that lens to start with, that helps, because straight away you lose people, but you lose the people that wouldn't be interested anyway. But you gain the people that really bought into that as an idea and as a thesis. And so I think being really upfront with people has meant we have a smaller but much more committed, much more understanding group of investors.
Yeah. I guess on the flip side, not just choosing or finding investors, but the founders and the businesses that you bring to the table. How, I can imagine you get so many coming to you wanting or needing investment. What do you look out for when you're going through probably a number of different proposals and you're having to decide probably quite a small number compared to the number of I don't know if it's your applications that you receive.
I think the most important thing is, what is this founder like?
Mm-hmm.
Because at an early stage in a business, the idea is going to change and develop. But the most important thing is, is this person up to the job?
Mm-hmm.
Are they determined enough? Do they want this enough? Do they have the right skills, the right insight into this problem? And then I think the other thing is what is this problem?
Mm-hmm.
Because, is this a big enough problem? Is this a really painful problem for those people experiencing it? And I think if you can find the right person to solve, who's really dedicated and really talented and is trying to solve a big enough, challenging enough problem, that's really where the focus is. What the solution is just is going to evolve and change.
Yeah.
But I think if you focus on those two things, you go a long way. It can be very easy to get caught up in the solution, but that's less important, I think,
at
an early stage than the founder of the problem.
Yeah. And are there any telltale signs when you speak to a founder where you think, okay, no, they're really committed and they're determined? Is there a test that you have in your mind or certain things that you really hone in on? If you see that, you think, okay, I feel as though they'll take it all the way.
So I think you want to see a level of challenge and resilience that they've already been through.
Mm-hmm.
So is this person really committed to this problem? They haven't just woken up one day and gone, I've read a Guardian article on homelessness and I'm going to try and solve it.
Yeah.
Which ironically was kind of me. So maybe I wouldn't have invested in myself. But anyway, is this person serious? Do they have many years of dedication to trying to solve this problem?
Mm-hmm.
What level of resilience have they shown and determination have they shown to try and solve this problem so far and to this business and make it successful? And do they still want it enough after that?
Mm-hmm.
I think that weeds out people pretty fast. Do people want it enough?
Yeah.
And I think the founders who really, we have a pretty low failure rate. I found done pretty well, but really, actually, the thing I've learned is that kind of desire means a lot when the times get tough.
Yeah.
Is this do or die for you? Do you really want this?
Yeah.
Are you going to spend the next 5-10 years of your life dedicated to this? That's really what you're looking for.
Yeah. Almost a bit of an obsession.
Very obsessional, to the point where other people may see it's like unhinged or unhealthy or toxic, but that is what you want to see in a founder.
Yeah, exactly. So I can imagine there's so many times when the majority of people would give up or become overwhelmed. And so you have to just have that urge in you to solve that problem bigger than any challenge, anything that you come up against. And I guess for you, you've also had times like that. So obviously I can imagine many in the Bike project. I can imagine some in Daring Capital, though it sounds like it's going really well. I know you've invested, I think, 2.5 million now, maybe.
About 2.6 now, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. How do you personally get yourself to keep going when you face challenges?
Yeah, so Daring Capital has definitely had some big challenges. How do I personally keep going is a good question. So I think, I started the Bike project, started working on it late 22. I've been running my own thing for over 13 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like a long time. You get used to knowing that how to work things through, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There is a pattern to challenges. You start to understand that how to work through things. And also you start to have that belief that even though you don't quite know how you'll get through this, that you will get through this because this is your, this 36th time you've had this type of challenge and you've got through the first 35. Yeah. And so that you can do this. And that belief, I think, comes from just practice. So I think all of that helps: track record, experience, belief, that inner resilience and desire to get through it. I think also that also means that you don't panic.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, I think, make errors under pressure because they rush things. They do things that are very panicky, and that leads to sort of bad results. I think take a moment, take a beat, and have a few discussions and figure out your next steps, I think is always good advice in a crisis or when things go wrong.
Yeah. I can imagine in a business that's like this, and you always have to be that more level person, kind of keeping it more level rather than going up and down with the highs and lows.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Being resilient to the lows, but also you're not getting too carried away with the highs. You do want to celebrate your successes because, or else what's the point?
Yeah.
But not getting too carried away. Okay, this was a mega win. That doesn't necessarily mean the next win will be as easy or as good. This was a big one. Let's build from there, but not get too carried away with it, I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Also really interested because it isn't really common to have people who spend their life deciding to do things that the main goal is to make the life of others better. So for the bike project, it was very much, okay, people outside of myself have this issue. How am I going to help solve that for them? In Daring Capital, people are trying to solve issues that might not always affect me, but I believe that they can make the world a better place for other people. I'm going to dedicate my life in helping them do that. Do you think that you've always been like this? Where do you think this desire to impact others has come from?
It's a very good question. I think that it comes from a number of places. I think I've always had a little bit of I've always been kind of aware that I think about the world a little bit differently to everyone else. I have a little bit of a rebellious streak. I like to I see things a bit differently and I like to do things a bit differently. And I think that lends itself to working on causes that don't necessarily relate to me personally. It's different, you know?
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of that. I think I come from a family of activists. I think that helps. My parents grew up in apartheid South Africa and were apartheid activists. I think I'm Jewish, and the refugee stories is something you grow up with as a Jewish person. I think it probably from like multiple places. I also think that there are probably... So on the one hand, with Daring Capital, I'm investing in underrepresented founders, serving what we call underserved communities, people facing poverty or discrimination. I'm not an underrepresented founder. I do not come from a background where I face poverty or discrimination in any kind of meaningful way. And so on the one hand, I'm not from those communities, but on the other hand, I have been a founder, a purpose-driven founder with a social mission for a very long time. And a lot of that pain and the challenges that journey has is something I relate to very strongly and I feel very passionately about, because that was my experience. And to an extent, that continues to be my experience because I still work on those issues. So I think there is, in some ways, with Daring Capital, more of a personal link because of that founder background than there was with the bike project.
Yeah, yeah. And that's really interesting, going back to having parents who are activists and, yeah, I guess the community, the Jewish community and refugee story being part of that kind of discussion growing up. I think it is really interesting because you meet people, and I've interviewed some people who are very similar in the sense that sometimes they don't necessarily relate to the issue as much, like the bike project, but it's almost just this innate feeling that if they see an issue and it's unjust, and they have the solution, why not do it? And it's going back to that daring side of things. It's like, well, I'm not just going to accept the status quo. I'm not just going to allow this issue to carry on because it's happening and, it's been happening for a while. I'm actually going to try and do something about it. And it doesn't matter if someone hasn't done it before, or even with Daring Capital, it doesn't matter if there's not loads of investors who are investing in this space because it's not getting as much return. I will find the people who will invest because how hard can it be, sort of thing. It's really interesting just to meet those people, and it's almost this restlessness that you see in them. I also think the name Daring Capital is very clever as well. Looking at the people that you've met along the way and the founders that you've invested in since starting Daring Capital, what has been some of your favorite or most memorable moments or success stories?
That is a good question. There's a real buzz when you raise someone like a good chunk of money, or you get a really big check for somebody. That is a real excitement. So yeah, some of the founders that we've raised a lot more money for, that's always really exciting. We are, for some founders, the biggest or only source of capital that they've raised. And that's fun to sort of, it's great having other people involved too. But, that really gives you that sense of, right, without our intervention, this person wouldn't really have a business. In terms of specific stories, who are the best ones to point to? Yeah, some of the most inspirational founders I work with, I guess, are Kanu, who's the founder of Speak, helping parents of children who are self-harming. Met Kanu completely at the beginning, no track record, no revenue, invested at her at an early stage. And yeah, it's just gone. She's just so, works really hard, is incredibly dedicated, and in a kind of quiet way has built up quite a significant business. I think they are, about 2 years later, approaching 500K in annual revenue, doing something self-harm for is like incredibly tough, unsexy, not something that is going to raise from traditional sources. To give you a different example, I really enjoy working with Sophie O'Brien, the founder of Pollen. She is incredibly passionate about giving young people better access to jobs through, and how discriminating and exclusionary CVs and cover letters and application processes. And she does it with a lot of just an extremely high amount of enthusiasm and passion, as well as having a lot of fun along the way. But yeah, I enjoy her energy as well.
I think it's so amazing, the secondhand enthusiasm, excitement, passion you get from speaking with people who are on that journey, on that mission. That's part of the reason why I love doing this and speaking to people who are doing such exciting things, and you can tell that the passion oozes out of them, and it makes you get excited as well, and also makes you reconsider where you're getting that level of passion in your life from as well. And yeah, it's just, I don't think there's anything better than talking to someone about something that they're really excited about. And so I can imagine it's almost self-fulfilling, where you get excited about something and you talk to a founder who's then really excited, and then it almost feeds you.
Yeah, definitely.
And I did see something interesting that you said when, I think it was another interview that you did, and you spoke about going into Down Capital. Your aim was to obviously invest or get investment for underrepresented founders, really amazing businesses, but also to have fun. How do you think, or how well do you think you are at achieving that goal, when I can imagine there are really stressful days? I think when we spoke before, you had just back-to-back calls all day. And obviously it's very easy to go into something, say, I'm going to have loads of fun every day at work. But then when you actually get into it, it's a bit more challenging.
It's a good question. I think it's unrealistic to think, as you say, am I going to have fun every single moment of every single day? No. Overall, though, do I want the experience to be enjoyable? Yes. And I think that's a really important part of my experience, because, and that comes from the last few years of running the Bite project through COVID, refugee crisis, cost of living crisis, wasn't fun. It was very, very stressful, and I didn't enjoy it. And so a key goal for me was to have a good time doing this. And overall, I've had a really good time. I think where I felt more challenged, is where, we had some really good success, probably over the course of 24, first part of 25, which was amazing in terms of amounts raised and the money we raised for extending founders. But then what that success did was put pressure on the next one's got to be better and better and better. And that was really, I think that was unnecessary amounts of pressure. And I think, okay, you take a step back, you say, you just have to control what you control, do the best you can in each individual business, in each individual case, and, factor in that environments get harder and markets get tougher. And I think bearing that in mind has allowed me to start to enjoy it more again, having put myself under more pressure for a while, I think is an important factor.
Yeah, I can imagine kind of recalibrating is so important.
Yeah.
Almost every so often taking a step back and being like, okay, I'm getting carried away or caught up in these things.
Exactly.
Let's remind myself what I wanted to do, why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
What's worked for me in the past. Because life just goes by so quickly and all of a sudden months has passed and you're probably buried in different problems or you've been on a loop about something you haven't even thought about. And that just, I think, takes experience and time, and sometimes just taking a second away or having someone else, like an advisor, say to you, hang on a second, let's forget about this for a minute and remember, these lessons we've learned. I think something I always like to talk to people about are failures that they've experienced and maybe what they've learned and how they've come back from that. Is there any failure that sticks out in your mind that you've had that's been a bit tougher to come back from? When you look back at your careers, it can be with Daring Capital, the Bike Project, earlier in life. Is there any moment where you thought, oh, I shouldn't have really done that, but that's a really good lesson to take forward?
Yeah, loads. I mean, what's a good one to pick out? I mean, at Daring Capital, I think, so I guess a little story. When we started out, I thought, all right, we'll do calls. When we find a business, we'll do a call and we'll do an event at the beginning. But the first event went well, where founders pitched at an event. And so we carried on doing events. We did 6 of them over almost 2-year period. And we raised, about 1.8 million or so from the first 6 events, which is great in some ways. But in other ways, it just didn't. There were lots of issues, or a lot of work, meant we could only do a handful of events a year. Founders missed out in between. And it took the 6th event going quite badly in terms of amounts raised and engagement to go, okay, we're going to ditch this model and move to a different model. And we're still in the early days of the new model, but I think it's just so much better. And I wish that I had, you sort of know that it's a challenge and it's king, but it's that like overall numbers start, tick up massively. You sort of think, well, what's going, what's not to like? Whereas I wish I'd fixed it. I wish I'd pivoted while it was going well, rather than waited for it to really go badly and realised there was a much better way of doing things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think if it ain't broke, you still fix it. Do you know what I mean? Not always, but I think in this instance, the pivots felt much, much better.
I think that's also really tough, isn't it? Because if things start to plateau or not work, sometimes you think, okay, maybe it's just, it'll come back up.
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, when do you decide, actually, no, this isn't coming back up? I need to change. And I think also something that I think is tough for founders is becoming attached to the way that something is done, because they put loads of time and effort into making that model. And sometimes it can be really tough to then say, okay, as much as I thought this was really going to work and I was really committed to this idea, I should actually maybe change it. It's hard to let go sometimes of ideas that you have, and that can be a challenge.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's hard to let go when things are seemingly working.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And is there actually, let me restart that question. When you first started the Bike Project and you obviously had a mission that you wanted to achieve, if you'd looked forward 10 years and had seen that it had grown to 2.5 million annual revenue, do you think your 24-year-old self would have believed that you had the skills and the capacity to build what the Bike Project became?
I think when you're young, everything seems easy because you haven't done it yet. And so probably if you'd asked my 24-year-old self, could I build this into 2.5 million in 10 years? I'd have probably said, well, why did it take me so long, I think the thing that surprised me a lot is all the way through, and certainly at the beginning and all the way to the end, is we got a huge amount of publicity at the Bike Project. I don't know, and I still don't quite understand why, but it just really captured people's imagination, on most major news channels, most things. And it really did grab people's attention. I think media outlets liked it because it's very visual, a bike, someone smiling with a bike. But that was always a bit of the awards we won and the the media that we got, that was always more of a shock and a surprise than the growth. I think I would have said, well, yeah, like this is what you do. You start something and it grows, and I'm an ambitious, competitive, hardworking person. And I think you have that. A lot of people start businesses when they're young because they have a little bit of naivety about what it takes to do something, and you need a little bit of that.
Yeah, almost ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
You kind of want to go into it. It's probably if someone shows you how many challenges you'll face and what you'll go through to get to that point, it probably would deter you. But like, okay, maybe let's go to a different career route.
Exactly, yeah.
So I think that is actually a really good point. It's almost, I think you can always get caught up in the challenges before starting something. It can actually stop you from ever wanting to do it.
Yeah.
So you need a bit of a just jump in the net will appear mentality.
Yeah.
And is there any beliefs that you think you've had to overcome about yourself or about what you think is possible to get to where you are today? So when you were going into Daring Capital, were there any limiting beliefs that you had that made you think, should I be doing this? Is this a good idea? That you almost had to reframe, or it took someone else to tell you, no, like you can do this to overcome? The answer can be no as well.
I think when you raise a bit of money at the beginning, so you're very, very optimistic, very happy. Suddenly you raise a little bit of money and suddenly you feel all this pressure that someone's given you, entrusted you with what seems like a very considerable amount of money. And you need to deliver. You've started this, you've got people's trust, you've got people's money, everyone's enthusiastic. And suddenly then you really feel the pressure. I see this with a lot of founders as well. They get a huge amount of effort raising money. Then they've got the money and they have to deliver, and that's bloody difficult. Really difficult, actually. And so that's where it can be really challenging, and you need that bit of belief to kind of push through and sort of block out the noise. But, for me, that just meant working incredibly hard and really pushing yourself to be the best version of what you can be. And belief took a long time to come, but eventually it was, started quite cocky, suddenly realized how hard it was. And then building up that belief, I think, is just from practice, repeating over and over again. Yeah. And really, really working hard and being incredibly determined and believing that that was enough to figure things out.
Yeah. And I guess to maybe round off the conversation, what advice would you give to the founders coming to Daring Capital and saying, please help me find investment for this idea that I have?
What do you mean, what advice? As in what kind of advice? Or
yeah.
What?
From your past experience, talking founder to founder.
Okay, founder to founder. What advice would I give them on their business? That's a difficult one. Stay focused. Figure out one thing that you're going to prove and be good at, and that's all you need to do.
I think that's a good one, because I think a lot of the time, people who are founding a business, they probably have quite a few ideas, and then
and this, we can do this and we can do that, and it gets very scattergun. And you're like, no, there's one thing that we need to do and prove works, and that's it. Yeah,
proof of concept, and then
it's one thing you need to prove.
Yeah, and I guess going to the other side of that question, if investors or founders want to find you, or benefit from Daring Capital, whether that's joining the syndicate or being a founder on the other side of receiving the investment, where can they find you? What's the best way to go about that?
They can find us on they can go on our website, daringcapital.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn, as a lot of people do.
I'm sure your inbox is just reels and reels of messages.
I do get a fair bit. Yeah. Comes in waves.
Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been a pleasure and so interesting.
Great. Well, lovely to meet you. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you.